Okay, so this is going to be the section where we talk about the submit event on a form. Again, let's look at it here. Submit events, I think, only happen on forms. They cannot happen on buttons or p tags. Let's do submit event. Again, look at the URL that I have here. This is like where all the events are documented. I'm just doing Command F to search for submit. I found this one. Submit. Let's read a little bit about it here. The submit event fires when a form is submitted, a form element. And it says, note that the submit event fires on the form element itself and not on any button or input type submit. Inside, forms are submitted, not buttons. The submit event only fires when the user clicks a submit button or input type submit in a form. The event is not raised when calling the form.submit method directly. Okay, so we know that this is an event that is happening once we try to submit a form. So let's look at some example here. I have the same HTML files. I just remove all the content that I had before, and now I have a form. I have a form with two inputs, one for the first name and one for the last name, and then a button called submit, and then I close my form tag here. So let's look at what happens here. You may have noticed this already as well. So I'm on my page and I have my developer tools open, and here I can type in my name, and I'm going to hit submit, and something is going to happen. Okay, so a few things happen. As I click submit, one was the boxes became empty. They were emptied. Even the zoom of my page was changed. I had this in a bigger zoom. Also, in here, you may have noticed that the URL changed. The URL now has this dollar sign, question mark, and then the name of my input, first name, and then equal to the value, an ampersand, and then the name of the other input equal the value that I had there. So this is because by default, like when we didn't have any JavaScript in the browser, this form will be submitted in this way. This form will be it will reload the page and it will try to submit the information of the form to this URL, basically, to a URL, so that the information of the form can be processed. Now, we very rarely want this default behavior to happen, which is erasing the content and refreshing the page and trying to submit here. We want more control over this process. So for gaining more control, what we could do is add an event listener to the form, listen for the submit event, and then do anything we want once we hear or once the form receives the submit event. So let's look at what that will look like. Let's go back here. Oops. So that's what's going on. Like when I hit submit, my page refreshes. There's some flickering. The URL changes, and this is the browser. This is the default behavior of a form trying to send this data to a web server so that it can be saved. But again, we very rarely want that default behavior. So first, let's look at how we can listen for the submit event in the form. So as I said before, for the most part, we will be writing our code inside the callback to the DOM content loaded event listener. And in here, what I want to do is I want to grab the form. So I'm going to do that. Let's call it my form equal to document that query selector. And then here, what do I want to grab? I want to grab the form by the tag name. Okay. And then let's add, how do we add an event listener to the form? Just the way that we add an event listener to any other element. We say the name of the element, that add event listener. Now here, what event do we want to listen for? We want to listen for the submit event. As I show you in the documentation, there is such a thing. The second argument to the add event listener is a callback function, in this case an ES6 anonymous function. And remember that add event listener will pass in something called the event here. It will pass in the event itself. This event represents the submit event. Just like as we saw previously, this event represented the click event, and it had information about where the click happened and who was the target of that event. So here, let's do, for now, let's do something like console or window.alert, the form was submitted. So, okay, let's look at this. Remember that all this is inside of there. So I'm grabbing the form from the DOM. I have to have that inside DOM content loaded, because if not, then the form will not be there. And I'm adding an event listener to the form that is going to listen for the submit event, and this is the function that will fire as that event happens. Now let's see, let's refresh this in here. I'm going to put in my information, and I'm going to click submit. Now, note that the page hasn't refreshed, and I have the form was submitted. I hit OK, and then my page is refreshed. But one thing that we accomplished was, okay, we're successfully able to listen for the submit event in the form, and this is what we want to happen once that event gets registered. So instead of, so now let's look again here at the event. Let's do window.dir. Oops. No, not window. Console.dir event. Let's take a look at this event. Oh, let's do, I think we are not going to get to see the event in the console because of the page refresh so fast. We're just gonna see a flicker in here. Let's look at that. Going back here, I just put in my information again. Let's just refresh, do something, submit. The form was submitted. That is the window.alert. Great. Now I hit OK. Note here that it's going to be a flickering really fast. OK, and you saw really fast the event was there, console log, but then the page was refreshed, and then the refreshing of the page will erase the console. So let's try to do this. Let's do console.dir the event before the alert. Let's see what happens. Now we have the event here. Oh, but note also that we cannot really inspect it because the browser is just waiting for us to click OK here. So this is not going to let us do much. Okay, so the thing is, we don't want the submission of a form to refresh our page. We want to prevent that from happening. Then it turns out that the event object that gets passed in here, which represents the submit event, has a method called prevent default. So we could do event that prevent default. If we do this, you can read about it in the documentation. It will prevent the default behavior of the event. And in other words, the default behavior of the submit event on a form is to submit that data, to send that data somewhere else and refresh the page. Right? That's the default behavior. But we want to prevent it. So there is a nice little function called prevent default that will make it not refresh the page, not send that information to a web server just yet. So let's look at this. Let's refresh this page. Add zoom. Let's type in something. Now I'm going to click submit, and I get the form was submitted. Now I'm going to hit OK, and note that the page didn't refresh. I still have the inputs were not removed, the text was not removed, nothing really refreshed. We still have the event here. That was our console log ERR. So let's look at the difference again. Let's comment that line. Let's refresh. Say AAA submit. Actually, let's just even look at the change in the URL. Let me remove this from here. This is my page. Put in something, submit. The form was submitted. Hit OK, and then the page is refreshed. This is emptied. This is appended to the URL. Now let's look at the difference. Let's reload the website again. Let's look at the difference once we have this line. Event.prevent default. My page is refreshing, and then I'm going to type something, hit enter or submit, and then the page says the form was submitted. I hit OK, and we can see that my page was not, the inputs were not cleared, the page was not refreshed. We have the event here. So that is how we can prevent the default behavior of an event. For instance, this is in the documentation as well. The default behavior of an on-click event on a checkbox is to select that checkbox. We could prevent that from happening if that's what we wanted by doing the event prevent default, but instead of a form in a checkbox. It will prevent the checkbox to be selected if that is what we wanted. Okay, let's see what else do I have here. Content somewhere. Okay, yeah. So that's pretty much it for the submit form. Let's take it in a little bit further, and let's do now we're able to prevent the default. What I want to do is see if we could like display this information that the user typed in here. If we could display, once they submit, could we display that information here at the bottom as sort of a summary? Let's try to do that. Instead of alerting, I'm just going to prevent the default. Let's say it again. Submit, nothing really is happening, right? So, what I want to do is I want to display the information that the user typed right underneath, sort of as a summary. So there is a few ways in which you could do this. First, I want to create a div here called, let's do, what should I call this? Let's do ID. There are multiple ways of doing this. This is just one. Summary. I'm just gonna call that summary. Now, what I want to do is, I want to, once the form is submitted, I want to grab this summary div and add a paragraph with the content of this input box and the content of the other input box. So what we could do is, inside the event listener, which is our callback, I'm going to do let summary equal document dot query selector. Remember that for grabbing by ID, I need to use the pound sign or the hashtag summary. This is the ID of my div. And then what I want to do is, I want to create a first name. Actually, let's just do it bare like this. Just put the content in the div itself. So we can just do summary. I'm not sure if I'm spelling summary correctly. Okay, yes, that's correct. Summary dot inner text is going to be equal to, but now okay, I want the inner text to be equal to the content of the input boxes. So that means I need to grab the content of the input boxes first. So let's do let first name equal to document dot query selector. Oh, but then now because I have two inputs, I will need to give the inputs an ID. Spoiler alert: there is actually a way in which you could instead of grabbing by ID, you could grab by name. But we're not gonna get into that currently. So that if I was able to grab by name, then I wouldn't need to add the ID here. But since we haven't seen that, you can go ahead and explore how you could specify here a selector that will allow you to grab by name instead of ID. You could also just Google that and you'll find it. For now, I'm just gonna do first name, and then the ID for the other one is going to be just last name. Oh, also here, it's good to keep a standard. If you're doing single quotes, then do everything single quotes. Don't mix it like me that I was doing double quotes. Single quote. Okay, now I'm going to grab the first name, and I'm also going to grab the last name. Just replace this last name, document query selector, last name. So note here, all this is happening inside of the callback for the submit event listener. So the first thing that I'm doing is just preventing the default behavior, which is preventing it from refreshing, grabbing first name and last name inputs, and then grabbing the summary. Now the summary is going to be equal to, what I want to do is, summary please be equal to the first name. Remember that the first name here is an input, is this input tag. Input tag don't have inner HTML. They have not inner HTML. They don't have inner text. If I want to grab the content of the input like that for A's, I need to do first name dot value, and then last name dot value. So let's look at what we're doing here one more time. Grabbing the first name, grabbing the last name inputs, grabbing the summary div, and then I'm going to set the inner text of the summary div to be equal to the first name dot value, which is whatever they put in this first box, and concatenated or doing the string interpolation as well to have the last name value. So let's look at what this will give us in here. Leho, Franco, and then I'm going to submit. Oh, it's not working. It should appear, a div should be here with the content Alejo Franco. Let's see. Are we getting any errors? Console, no, it's empty. Form div summary, then that's empty. So let's see, summary. ID summary. I'm not sure what's going on here, but you know what? We can find out. Oh, here, this is a spelling mistake. Last name. First, I don't think that will be the error, but let's see. Oh, that was actually the error. Huh. That's weird. So if I have this misspelled here. Oh, I do get the error. Let's try it one more time. I don't know why I wasn't seeing the error. Maybe I forgot to refresh. I think that was it. I forgot to refresh. So let's do Alejo Franco. Just FR. Then I hit submit and I get this error here. Click on it. Cannot read property value of null. Again, that's because, well, there is no element with this ID. This is a misspelled last name, so it doesn't find any element, therefore last name becomes null. And then here I'm trying to say null.value. That doesn't make sense because null is not an object, doesn't have a value property. So here name. Once we have that, save it, refresh this page here. Now type, and then once I hit submit, it displays that text in the div, which is my summary. Cool. So that's one of the examples as to why listening for a submit will be handy, right? If you have a form, I think I mentioned this. If you have a form, some websites will once you hit submit, they sort of show you a preview to sort of confirm that all the information is correct. This is just a very rudimentary way that we could accomplish the same. We're sort of showing this summary, this preview of the information that will be submitted. So that completes our chapter on listening for the submit event in forms.